Delighted on this episode of Words, Images, and Worlds to be talking with author, artist, film fanatic, Rich Tommaso. Rich, thank you for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me.
A pleasure. The last time I saw you was at Heroes Con back in June. I think we have a mutual friend named Sturge, who has been very kind to me. Sturge has been very kind.
Yeah, I've known him for years. I always catch up with him at that show, and he's a
Yeah.
really good guy.
Yes, definitely, definitely. When I was in my doc program, he was my advisor, now friend, and we used to meet weekly or thereabouts, and he would share comics with me, and I had kind of a background in comics already, and he expanded a lot of my thinking about the kinds of comics that were being published and what was being done in the medium. So always curious to learn from him and connect.
Yeah, it's great to have someone like that to kind of
Yeah,
clue you in on stuff and
yeah,
recommend stuff you weren't aware of before.
definitely, definitely. I've tried to pay that forward, and I'm curious what got you into comics and this wonderful medium of creation and fandom.
So I've always been drawing, like as far back as I can remember. Early memories, like being in kindergarten, drawing all the characters from the newspaper back then, probably like the Lockhorns and Beetle Bailey
Mm,
and uh, Snoopy and stuff like that. So I was always interested in cartoons. As a kid, I was for some reason I was only into comic strips. I didn't really go to. I don't know why I wasn't really into comic books. I think as a kid I wasn't that interested in anything that was representational art. So
hmm
stuff that was cartoony or had a weird style, that was something I would gravitate towards. So animation and comic strips were my thing. I didn't really get into comic books until I did read Mad occasionally, and so I liked Sergio Aragones' stuff, and he would draw
Oh
in the
yeah.
little cutters in the corners. And the first comic book that I picked up and followed was Gru. That came out when I was in about like seventh or eighth grade, and then so
Mm,
that's my like weird segue from strips into books, being like, oh wow, there's a whole book of this guy.
yeah. That's such a great age. I was a middle school teacher for 8 years and clued into a lot of fandom when I was in like seventh and eighth grade, and you're just starting to kind of picture culture beyond like kid culture, and you're
Yeah,
peering into adulthood. So
yeah.
I'm
There's a
glad
lot of
glad
changes that
Gru was there.
happen. It's a big
Yeah,
time for change. I think I made it the end of eighth grade. I made the decision to no more toys. I wasn't gonna buy. I wasn't gonna get toys anymore. I remember making like a conscious decision of like, okay, I have to stop. I have to grow up now. I can't. No more toys. I can't.
yeah.
Of course, I have like toys on my
I was gonna
back
say,
there.
how's that working out? I also have a nice toy collection. So I was having my students create arguments to different audiences about why I should continue buying toys, including one of my co-teachers. She was one of the audience members. So I think absolutely the childhood lives on and changes, right, as we get older.
Yeah, there's something about that. I feel like in the past like few years I've been thinking about not even few years, maybe like 10 or more years thinking about like how do I get back to how can I get back to loving what I do the same way I did as a
Mm,
kid? Like don't have so many like prerequisites before going into doing something like so yeah, I've been thinking about that. I've been drawing with like colored pencil again, which is something I only did as a kid, and thinking like, yeah, why not go back to that again sometime? Like, be interesting. It's just like looking for ways to constantly keep things fresh is challenging.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you've done a lot of work. I'll mention some titles here for listeners. Black Phoenix. There's a great deal of work there, as we were talking. Spy Sealed, Dark Corridor, in the Garden of Earthly Delights. A range of work, quite a stack of books and styles. You play with different styles as well.
Yeah, I've always done that. I think I have like ADD in that way. When I my first the first books that I did professionally were for Fantagraphics back in the 90s. And every time
Mm-hmm.
I did a different book, I would change my style. And I remember Gary Groth saying, Rich, if you keep changing your style, no one's going to recognize like who you are. It's not like, but I just, I would get, yeah, I would draw something, and then I'm so influenced by so many things that I read. So I
Mm.
always think like, wow, it'd be nice to draw a book. I'd like to draw a book like that, or try this style out. And yeah, I just get tired of doing things the same way again and again.
I hear that. I hear that absolutely. I have that on the educator side, on the writing side. Yeah, one of these days, perhaps I will be a skilled enough artist to get tired of myself as an artist, but we'll see. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. What are you currently reading that's informing your imagination and direction?
Oh, what am I reading? Oh, right now I started reading. I just got the new Photographic Memory. It's a new graphic novel by Bill Griffith, and it's
Yeah,
really fascinating. He's just so incredible to me. He's created this whole new career really late in life, and it's just doing these graphic novels that are interesting because they're a lot of them have historical like there's a historical like fumbling for words here. They're fascinating books, and they're part autobiographical, and like his subjects sound like they may have nothing to do with them, but he there's always like a personal connection to everything that he's working on. And it's just really interesting the stuff that he's been doing. He's been making so many like interesting comics lately. So yeah, I've been
yeah.
reading that, and I do a lot of rereading. That's the thing. I've been reading a lot of Mad and
Mm-hmm.
works for like Wally Wood stuff, and even stuff that he did after Mad, because I'm working on an issue that's supposed to be like an old 1952 Mad. So
Cool,
it's
cool.
important to kind of keep that in front of my eyes if I'm doing something in that style. Um,
Yeah, gotta keep it fresh and keep yourself immersed in it.
yeah, because I could, like I said, I can be inspired by, like, I can just pick up a book and read it and just be instantly inspired by it and be thinking in kind of the way that that book is drawn and think about doing things completely different. So yeah, it's when I do books where I'm really trying hard to kind of like do something in a similar style. Uh, I sometimes will just read things that are drawn in that same style just to kind of keep that in front of my eyes while I'm doing the project.
Yeah, yeah. Any other additional points of inspiration that you use? Do you also engage with music? And I know that we will talk film as well and animation. Any of those kind of elements that you keep yourself immersed in creatively?
Not music so much. I used to, it used to be that was all I would listen to is I would just listen to music whenever I was working, especially if I'm inking, there's not like all the like thinking is already done, all the writing is done. So I can just, it's kind of a meditative thing. Just do this while I listen to music. But yeah, now it's just like, yeah, I'm mostly just, I'll play movies or television shows that I've seen more than
Hmm.
once and have that on the background, just as like, just to have like company, I think in the room while I'm sitting there all day drawing something. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. The pre-recordings as company, I do that as well. Some nice background.
yeah.
Yeah. What are you currently viewing in the world of film or fascinated with in film?
What am I watching? A new thing has been Westerns. I never really
Nice.
liked Westerns in the past, but the past maybe 5 years, I've been watching some Westerns by Anthony Mann, and I was never a big fan of John Wayne. My dad was a huge John Wayne fan and always had Westerns on. It was just something that I was never really interested in it. But I think finding the right one, there's always someone that's good at doing these genres, right? So
Hmm.
finding Anthony Mann's films has been great, and looking at James Stewart westerns, even the early ones from the 30s, like Destry Rides Again. Those are just great. Yeah, I think it's a matter of finding the right ones that speak to me.
Are you currently working on a James Stewart impression by any
God.
by any means? That
It's
might
something,
just be
but
me.
yeah.
When I'm watching him, I want to talk like him. He had a unique uh characteristic, and I think Jim Carrey pulled a lot of that in.
It's hard to beat Dana
West,
Carvey's too. Dana Carvey's thing is so
yeah,
that he does that a lot. There's a Larry Sanders show that he's on where he starts going into Jimmy Stewart. It's just like perfect.
yes, yeah. Jimmy Stewart fixing a clock, and yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, Speaking of kind of westerns and John Wayne, have you checked out True Grit?
I
Have you
have,
traveled to that
yeah.
world?
And
Yeah.
it's funny because my wife had read the book, and I'm always slow to
Mhm.
that. Like if there's a movie that's about to come out, unless I get to that book right away or I'm in the mood to read it, I'm always going to watch the movie first. So I did watch the Coen Brothers film first.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
And then I read the novel and I was like, wow, this is, the novel is great and the film is equally great. And again, I don't like John Wayne, but someone had told me like, oh, the old one's good too. And I'm like, oh, here we go. Like, all right, I'll try to sit through this. And I was actually blown away at how similar it was. The
Yeah,
Coen Brothers, it has like a slightly different feel, and but it's very much the same movie. Yeah, I was surprised.
yeah.
That was much like the Scarface movie. I got the Howard Hughes Scarface from the 30s and was shocked at how similar it was to the crazy 80s movie that DePalma made. Even like the him being having some weird sexual feelings for his sister. Like all of that stuff
Hmm.
is in there. There's a scene where Paul Muni is the Scarface in the old version. He's at his window and he looks out the window and there's a blimp going by. It says the world is yours. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. It was amazing how similar those two movies were. And I'm always going to be more impressed by something, of course, that was made earlier, like many years earlier. But it's the same punch to it. So
Yeah, yeah. True Grit is probably my favorite of the John Wayne westerns, and there's a little Lebowski now for me, and everything that Jeff Bridges does, whether he intends it to be there or not. There's some
yeah,
Lebowski in kind of like the Tron world
yeah,
now, so I appreciate that
yeah,
level of it. And Coen Brothers dialogue is just its own special appreciation.
yeah, for sure. I
Yeah.
think the real noticeable difference is and it's a very Coen Brothers scene, is when the three men are being hanged and there's the Native American. He was like, I would like to say, and they just put the hood over. That's like that dark, really dark humor that comes from them. And so it's like the real noticeable difference in the movies. Like, well, there's that dark Coen Brothers.
Yeah, yeah. The element of satire. Yeah. De Palma makes me think as well, of course, Untouchables. Great,
Oh,
great
yeah.
film that I always try to include when I'm teaching like the 1920s and unpacking that era. And it's one of the ways that I get into Gatsby, along with like the Baz Luhrmann film.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But masterful cinema. I mean, I don't know who else would make me feel that compelled about a carriage kind of falling down a set of stairs
Yeah.
as De
Yeah.
Palma would.
Yeah. It's interesting how because he borrows that from I hope I don't get this wrong now. I think it's an Eisenstein, old Russian film. There's a,
Hmm. Hmm.
but it's for a completely, it's a different purpose. Like it's for a different purpose in that scene. But yeah, it's a really good idea. Um, I like that kind of swiping where it's like, oh, he's kind of like calling back to a movie, but it's used. Of course, De Palma's not going to do it the same way. I think there's like a
Right.
couple of bullets that go through the bassinet. It's like, oh my God, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's I feel like his films still felt like De Palma films in that period. Still, after a while, it gets to be. I really love his films, but there's a point where it stops feeling like, oh, this is definitely like a De Palma movie. You don't really feel it's almost like Mission Impossible. I think it took me years to even know that he
Oh
had
yeah.
directed that. That could have been anybody. But yeah, I watch his films quite a bit.
Yeah, there's kind of a dilution that happens, I guess, especially as studios get involved. And I imagine comics works this way too. If there's an overly involved studio or publisher, then things start to feel the same or start to feel kind of safe in a certain way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keeping characters and stories that close to the Bible of whatever that character or story happens to be for fear of
Yeah,
changing it.
I think the bigger stakes involved, like the more you're kind of penned in. like Marvel movies, there's so many things you have to follow. I can't even imagine how
Mhm.
restricting that is. Whereas if you watch something like Aliens versus Predator, uh, it's played with so much more. They're trying so many more things. I mean, it's a fun movie. It's a silly movie, but
Yeah,
the difference is like, wow, they're doing all these weird things here because the stakes are not that high. I'm sure there's not that much. Like you have to make this movie's got to make as many millions as the last one did. There's really not
right.
that many people paying attention.
Yeah,
Imagine.
I imagine that that would feel very freeing. And uh, I'm curious, as a movie fan, how much of your work then, visually and artistically, is cinematic? How informed is that by cinema, or is that a separate kind of avenue that you enjoy on its own?
Yeah, it doesn't directly um, it's not a direct inspiration in that way. I will get an idea from a movie or the spirit of a film. Like, oh, I
Hmm.
like this idea of this wrong man and he's running from like that kind of thing will kind of like inspire an idea. And then from there, once I start thinking of it as a comic book and I'm sitting down, like doing sketches and writing notes, any kind of movie quality of it or any movie like aspect of it is gone because now I'm thinking of it as a comic book. So I'm just thinking of telling the story in a completely different way. But I do get a lot of ideas just sitting in front of movies, even when I'm not, even if it's not that direct. There was a story I did called Seven Deadly Daughters, and it was this story about it's in Dark Corridor where like these two mob families
Hmm.
wiped out these others, and in doing so, there were all these orphaned children, and so these seven women that are orphaned like come back and they to get revenge, and all of that came from me watching the old Kiss
Oh,
of Death movie with Victor Mature, and he's going to prison, so he has to say goodbye to his two little girls, and he's putting them in a nunnery, and that whole idea came from like this 1 minute, 2 minute scene. I was like, oh yeah,
mhm.
wow. I wonder what if a whole bunch of people just like lost their kids and they all to go, go into these orphanages because they were all killed off. So yeah, like sometimes it's very like there's only like a little thing, and then other times I'll see a movie and think, wow, I'd really like to do a film in that kind of world or in that style. Um, but yeah, when
Yeah,
it becomes something completely different. Yeah.
yeah. So this is a creative process kind of question. Do you keep sketch pad, notepad, notebook kind of set up where like you take something like that to the page then, or what does that process look like? Do you let it cook for a little while?
It's changed over the years. I used to write scripts and then I found that restricting. And so I would just like keep notes and I would just like, I would have enough of an idea for like maybe 10 or 20 pages. And then as I'm working
Mhm.
on it, because comics is such a slow process, I would go back to that notebook and then think of ways to fill in the story, like what would happen in the middle of the story and later on in the story. But I would have enough of an idea of going in of like, okay, these are the characters, this is the situation that we're starting with here. It would be enough to kind of jump in, and then as I'm working on, I'm also writing notes and filling out the story. That is when it comes to comics and novels, that's very direct because I feel like if I'm just reading comics, which I'm normally just reading comics all the time, if I'm reading comics, I get character or more than one character idea in my head, and I'll just come up with something out of the blue, and I can just see scenes from the comic and everything. And it's funny, but if I'm in I'll go through spurts where I'll just like read like five novels in a row, like I'm just really into just reading text novels. And when I do that, like I'll get an idea and it's all just story. And I'll have to run over to my computer and just start typing. Like I'm just typing. I'm not even thinking about anything visual. So it's really those two things are very direct because they'll
Yeah,
inspire things in either a visual or just a written way. Um, and I think it's always like that. I never just see like I never just figure out a bunch of things about a story because the whole story will just come to me and I just sit
yeah,
down and just start typing and it's just all coming out. So it's funny how direct those two inspirations can be.
Yeah. Yeah. Where does genre come into that for you? Is that something that you sort of decide on later, or is that something that happens pretty early in the process?
Usually it's early. Sometimes I don't know, because I'll have a story idea and be like, so is this a horror story or would this be more of a crime? Sometimes I don't
Hmm.
know because it's almost like a story that has a foot in both worlds. But usually
Hmm.
when I come up with something, it's like I'll know like, okay, this would be good for science fiction or this would be good for horror or crime. I tend to lean towards crime more often because it's just like I read a lot of it and a lot of my favorite films are crime films too. And it's something I really when I my first book was called Clover Honey I did for Fantagraphics back in 1995 and I just felt comfortable in that genre and I think it was mostly from movies because I hadn't really read much of crime back then. And yeah, so I think it was like something like I had a natural knack for doing that kind of story.
Hmm.
It felt very much like a lot of the crime movies that I watched. It had the same kind of beats and everything. So that's something I just tend to go back to. It's a genre I like more than others. Um, but yeah, for a while, I was just trying to do like for many years, I was just trying to do straight fiction, like straight like reality, whatever you want to call it, reality fiction or
Hmm.
stories about real life. But I think I floundered a lot with that because I didn't really know what I wanted to say when I was doing that kind of stuff. It's kind of like I wanted to be that kind of cartoonist, but I wasn't good at just coming up with stuff, from my life. So many people do that, and people have had already done that better than I had, and
Hmm.
so I never really figured out a good way to do stories like that. And I think like when I went back to doing genres, which was probably about when was this now? Like 2008, 2009. I
Hmm.
immediately just like I came up with more story ideas. I seem to have more fun working with genres and things just kind of like flowed very easily. I mean, there's always story points that you take a while to figure out, and there are some comics that are more challenging to write than others. But I just felt more comfortable with doing going back to the comic. So I allowed myself to just, okay, forget about doing that kind of stuff and just like, do what you really feel like doing, instead of
Yeah.
what you think you should be doing. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so you're talking about crime, which uh, certainly carries with it different sets of expectations and different sort of gaming rules and things like that. Do you have authors or directors that work in that genre that you look to?
Yeah, I get a lot of inspiration from Richard Stark, who's also
Mm.
Donald E. Westlake. So the
Hmm.
Hunt novels are very fun. Like those are always inspiring to read because those are like nothing but style. They're so fun to read. And then his comedic crime. When I started reading Donald E. Westlake's other stuff, um, he does a lot of he wrote a lot of comedic crime novels. And once I started reading those, I started thinking like, wow, yeah, I would really like to do something like that. And the In the Garden story, that's one of those stories where it all came to me as a story because I was reading like one Donnelly Westlake after another, and that just came to me, and I just sat down and wrote it. So it was obvious like something that I really wanted to do, and I was having fun reading about it. So after so many days of doing that, like a story just came to me. So yeah, so
Yeah.
that's usually that, and movies, of course, too. Like I remember trying to think of ways to do things in comics and couldn't really figure them out. I remember thinking about like I have this story and it's very plot heavy, but how do I tell you about the characters? Like how do I get the reader to know who these characters are? And then I thought maybe I could just draw like maybe just have no words and just draw them in different scenes, and those little scenes would kind
Mhm.
of give you ideas. But I never really had I never really tried it out. And then when I went to see The Limey in the theater, the Steven Soderbergh movie, his film
Uh-huh.
does that. He just shows you all these scenes of these characters. Some of them you see later on in the movie, but doing that, it gives you, and I was like, oh my gosh, here's this idea being worked out really well in this movie
Yeah.
because it just gives you enough of an idea of the character and then he moved on with the story from there. Uh,
Yeah. Soderbergh does such playful stuff with cinema and those large casts of characters. He's really good at balancing that. Of course, he does like the smaller casts as well. He'll have a film with like three or four main players, but then you've got like the Ocean's movies that, feature a whole plethora.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that I have a lot of friends that like his stuff, but they don't like the Limey so much because they say there's so little going on. But I don't know. That's one of those where there's not that many characters, but what the characters that are in the story are interesting enough to carry, that story. Some things it's the plot that's interesting, and other things the characters are so interesting they can drive the story. You don't really care about the plot so much.
Yeah, he has a recent one out with Michael Fassbender. I can't remember what it's called right now. And Kate Blanchett is the opposite lead.
Oh yeah, I did see
Um,
that. Yeah.
yeah, and
Black Bag, I think it's called.
yes, Black Bag.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Black Bag. Yeah.
uh, and really interesting. Like focus on those characters and absolutely how he kind of plays that out and lets their tension and all of their dynamics play out through that story.
Yeah, it's an interesting spy thriller, but you're also getting like really interesting characters at the same time. I think a friend of mine didn't like it as much as I did because he expected like the action movie
Oh yeah.
spy thriller, and I was sitting there hoping for like a Tinker Tailor, and that's what it was more like. So I was like really happy. I was like,
Mhm.
oh great, this is more like this is him making a spy movie, but in the same way that he makes his small independent films, where it's the
Yeah.
character is very important and interesting. And so I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you also have a plethora of work, thinking about those omnibus copies that you have of just so much that you've done. What does that feel like at this point? Is that invigorating? Is that sort of like, let's try something new? You were talking about colored pencil as a place that you're expanding. What are you thinking about that at this point creatively?
Yeah, so I started that in 2019, doing Black Phoenix magazine as a thing. Was working on three projects. They all ended around the same time. I didn't have any other work coming to me, and I wasn't Image wasn't going to publish me anymore. And so I thought, well, let me like figure out this Patreon thing. Maybe I'll come up with an idea for a magazine that would be interesting for me, but also something that sounds interesting for someone to subscribe to. And yeah, that's what I've been doing this whole time. I'm working on the 21st issue of it, and I love that because it's more freedom than even working at Fantagraphics, say, because I
Yeah.
can literally do whatever I want from one issue to the next. Sometimes I make announcements if I'm really excited about something and I'm already working on it. I'll show work to my patrons on my blog on Patreon. But like if I'm working on something for a few weeks, because I try to put out a magazine every 4 months. And so if I
Mhm.
start working on something I'm excited about and I work on it for a few weeks but something else comes to me and for some reason I feel more strongly about it, I'll just push that aside and be like, nope. And I'll go back and be like, sorry, this isn't going to be the next issue. This is going to be, and I would drive a publisher crazy, of course, if somebody changed like that. So no, it's great. And a lot of it's comics. It's like mostly short form comics, although some
Mhm.
stories continue. But I also get to do a lot of illustration and I try to illustrate fake ads and, things that
Yes.
to get away from comics for like a day or two just to do something completely different. So yeah, any kind of I remember when I've always really been into like the New Yorker cartoonists and that ink and gray wash cartooning style of the 30s. And I was getting
Mhm.
really into that while I was working on a book that had nothing to do with that, but the book needed ads. And so I was like, well, I can do ads with these cartoons. I even looked up obsessively. I was like, wait, is that a thing? And I looked up on eBay, like I just put in like Charles Adams advertisement, and he had illustrated a ton of ads. And I was like, well, there you go. You can do that kind of. So it's great, even if I'm really, really inspired by something and want to play with it and when I'm in the middle of something else, there's always a way to like work it into what I'm already doing.
Yeah. Yeah. You can follow the muses that way, and I imagine that's also playful for the audience. I mean, it's nice to announce and be like, "Yes, this issue is going to do this," but when you change your mind, it's sort of like letting the audience into your creative process in a way too.
Yeah, yeah, and the audience there is great because they're all super supportive. They're supportive of what I do, and and it's not just a financial supportive that they're buying the book, but I wanted to do a romance comic, and I was actually worried. Again, I was thinking like I was with a publisher, and I was like, let me just put this out there that this is going to be my next thing. And most of the people were like, yeah, I mean, like whatever you do, that's fine. It sounds good to us. But I was actually, yeah, that was something I was like, well, I don't know. Like, are people going to like this one? I don't know. It's like a romance, completely different thing. But yeah, so it's very different from being, um, whether I'm at Fantagraphics or when I was with Image, like there, there's a certain kind of, you have a lot of readers, but you don't know how much they're really into what you're doing. That they could be into one thing one day and then the next day be like, oh, I'm not interested in, or they'll pick up one
Mm.
comic from you and then you'll change and do some other genre or something, and they're like, well, I'm not really interested in this one. So I was always kind of nervous about stuff like that. Should I change genres or should I do something completely different? Because you're worried about like what the sales are going to be like.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
no, this is
I'm
great.
usually cool, cool. Yeah, I'm usually more interested in seeing people play across genre that way, to kind of see like the auteur take on something of a different genre once I've gotten to know a creator in a certain avenue. So I'm always fascinated by that and the drive to create in different ways.
Yeah, it's hard. So there are projects that I do want to work on, but
Mm,
I can't figure them out visually. So those are just kind of like, I write down as many notes and whatever script they need to be. And so I've had things for a while that I'm like, oh, I'm still excited about them. I still think about them, but I haven't had like a visual idea of of what that book should look like. So I kind of put that off, until I'm ready to do it. So yeah, there are things that I want to work on that will take longer to do. So I kind of have to figure out what's great about this is I can always change the form of how I'm doing it, and that's fine as well. I put out an issue that was a newspaper instead of a magazine, for
mm,
one volume, and then like the end of the garden was an 80-page book. It wasn't like a magazine of shorts. It was just one big story. So I love that. I love that I can just change that, and it's okay. I can change the
yeah.
title. I've taken Black Phoenix as a title and made it into the publishing house because a lot of times when I come up with stories, if I come up with a title I really love, I want to see that title on the cover.
Mm,
So when I
mhm.
started having more and more ideas like that, I thought, oh, you know what I'll do is I'll change Black Phoenix into the publishing house, and then I can have fun with doing an actual title logo for the next issue.
Yeah, yeah. And I love the image of the phoenix. I don't know what inspired it, but that creative like rebirth and rebirth and rebirth. So it
Oh
can
yeah.
be whatever you'd like it to be.
Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I have one more genre kind of question, and then we'll give people some ideas about where they might find you online, and we can tap into anything that we might have missed. You were talking about crime and then romance. Is there a particular genre that you're feeling most at home in right now as a creator?
It probably still the romance
Mm-hmm,
genre. I've
hmm.
been doing something that for a long time I wanted to do comics about film, but I also wanted them to be comic book stories. Like I didn't want to just have to do like a biography or something. So I started doing when I was reading the 1940s Venus comics that Marvel put out, and a lot of those stories she comes in contact with Hollywood folk, right? And so I thought, oh, that's a good way to do it is just to set something in Hollywood. So I am working on a story that I still have one third of left to finish, called The Stitch Up, and there's a lot of romance to it because there are a lot of characters who are dating the other characters, and there's a lot of like jealousy going on between people. There's a crying to it, but it's also set in Hollywood. So I kind of filled this story with all the things that I love. Just kind of put everything into this one story. So that's been a lot of fun to do. It looks like the crime or the romance stories that I love reading, but yeah, it's just set in that world.
Cool, cool. And I know that you're a Heroes Con attender. Are there
Mhm.
other
Yeah.
spaces, convention wise, as well as the online spaces, the Patreon that people should know about?
So I reopened my Etsy shops. I've been selling some of the back issues of Black Phoenix on Etsy, and that's just Black Phoenix magazine. So I've been doing
Cool,
that,
cool.
and I probably will go to SPX this coming year. The next SPX I'll be at, but yeah, I'm always at Heroes Con.
Yeah, yeah. And I will plan to see you there again, in a few months, I guess, or
Yeah.
more than a few. Yeah, yeah. Have we missed anything in the conversation that you want to make sure to include?
I think the only other thing is that Spy Seal had come out last week, the new
Hmm,
collection of
hmm.
it. So there's a soft cover and like a limited hardcover, so that's out now by Floating World. Floating World is the publisher who does the my collections, like the omnibus.
Cool, cool.
Yeah,
So you are out there. You have amazing work that people can check out. I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate the time, and looking forward to seeing where creating takes you next.
yeah. Well, thanks for having me. It was fun.